Mudarabah is one of the Islamic finance instruments that has been used globally to bridge a financial gap in society, such as funding agricultural outputs and farm credit, infrastructural projects, and investment. The primary aim of Mudarabah financing is its equity mode in profit and loss sharing, whereby the capital provider and the user equally share risk that occur in business without negligence from the fund user's end. There are so many questions to ask on how Mudarabah work, the restriction, amongst others. But today on the program, we'll be getting some answers to those questions. Good morning, my name is Bukola Akinyele Isao, and I welcome you to another exciting episode of the Trust Actor High-F Learning Series. Today we'll be talking about matters in restricted and unrestricted Mudarabah investment. As you know that we have our in-house analysts and experts to shed more light on different topics that relate to the market, finance, economy, business, and the financial market as a whole. We will go on a short break, and when we return, we'll start the conversation. Stay with us. Welcome back for those who are just joining. So today the focus of our conversation is to discuss matters in restricted and unrestricted Mudarabah investment. Joining me now is Tunde Hajani, who is the Chief Financial Officer of Trust Author. Good morning, Mr. Tunde. It is good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Bukola. Thank you for having me. It's good to join you. Yeah.
You're welcome. There is a lot to discuss on Mudarabah as an asset-backed financing tool. But first, give us an overview of Mudarabah and its expenses.
So thank you very much, Bukola. It's a great topic that we want to discuss today, which is Mudarabah. And of course, this is somewhat something that happens to everyone on a daily basis. So what is Mudarabah? Mudarabah is just a transaction between two parties.
Exactly.
And one is the capital provider, and the other one is the Mudari, which is the entrepreneur. Now, so these two parties come together to ensure that they carry out a particular business transaction. So it could be an asset financing, it could be the construction of anything, it could be the purchase of any property, it could also be that they are just coming together to establish a particular business, which could be a long-term and it could be a short-term project. So these are instances where you can use Mudarabah. But depending, you have to understand the structure very well, and you have to understand the process before you enter into a Mudarabah transaction. However, for a Mudarabah transaction, you need to agree on the profit sharing between parties. The capital provider will have a particular sharing, and then the other party will also know what is going to belong to him at the end of the project, which is based on the profit that will be accrued, or that will be earned, or that will be received after the end of the project. Yeah, so this profit would now be something that will be shared among parties, and then the only reason why as we all know that a Mudarabah transaction is a trust-based transaction, and then on the basis of that, the capital provider is partnering with its funds, and then which is going to be managed by the Mudari, which is the entrepreneur or entrepreneur. Let's use it that way. So in this case of trust, there are instances where, of course, they are carrying risk, and then when parties share profit, of course, they share losses together also. So in the case of the Mudari, which is the entrepreneur, it will be losing his time and effort that it has deployed in the transaction when the transaction goes bad. And then for the capital provider, they will be losing their capital that they have provided. So these are instances where you now start thinking about Mudarabah. Does it really make sense? How does it really impact on people who are interested in providing their funds? However, there's a cover. The cover is the fact that if the losses arising from that transaction is as a result of gross negligence, misconduct, or breach of duty from the part of the entrepreneur. Definitely, the person is liable to recovering both principal and profit back to the investors, or whether the capital providers, as the case may be. Yes, for legitimacy, we have understood that in the past, even during the time of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he had instances where he was working for great mother, High Khadija, and then they entered into the Mudarabah transaction, and then it was on the basis of that he was managing business, and then profit are being shared according to the agreed ratio. However, there are instances where during this same period, there are instances where people are going to travel on a journey, and then they decide to carry loads or sell some of their properties or some of their goods during the course of the journey. So those that are told will definitely hand over their properties to them and then tell them to sell on their behalf. So when these are done, they can easily do what? Share on the basis of brother according to agreed profit sharing ratio that has been agreed by the parties. Yeah.
You hit a very good point. Mudarabah is one of the important methods of Islamic financing, broadly used in different fields, including Islamic banking. But how has Mudarabah's contract worked effectively for a project?
Okay, so it's very important that we bring this back to the financial institutions. You understand? So usually, before you can enter, except you don't want to deal with financial services, just a transaction between parties. Yes, we can go into any Mudarabah transaction. It could be for the construction of assets, any assets as the case may be, and then it could be kind of say that you want to enter into a particular project. You can enter into a project using Mudarabah, depending on the structure of the asset or the process of the asset. Now, if it is just for having a particular project, buying and selling, or buying and selling of any asset, or
Okay.
kind of construction of any asset, yeah. So if you go into a Mudarabah transaction with somebody who is an expert, like say probably a builder, or you say a surveyor or an architect or anybody who is or a developer who is known, or who's an expert in this particular field. Definitely, the person might not have the funds to carry out this business. As a provider of funds, you can engage with him. You can enter into a Mudarabah transaction. Say that you have this land, you don't have money to build, I have money to build. Both of us can come together, and then we can agree on profit and sharing. Of course, the profit or the capital I provide will be based on Mudarabah, and then at the end of the day, we agree on profit. And then once the asset is being sold, we can all share the profit as agreed in, from the onset. Yeah.
Okay, so Mudarabah is applicable to general specific investment. We talk about project funding, grid financing like construction, working capital, and small and medium enterprise. But both buyers need to, both the seller and the financer, they need to agree on what they want to be involved in on Mudarabah financing.
For any asset in Islamic finance or for any Islamic financial transaction, it is expected that the asset should be known from the onset. You need to know, you need to understand the asset you want to deploy. You cannot just do money and then profit on anything.
Yeah, thank you. So the question now is, what are the matters restricted and unrestricted in Mudarabah investment, which is our theme of discussion today?
Okay, so when we talk about restricted and non-restricted, and it's very important that we bring it to this contemporary Islamic banking practice. Yeah, so let me just give a quick example. For example, bank would in the bank financial statement, you will see the asset side and you see the liability side. Usually, globally, the bank had decided to use Mudarabah as a form of fund mobilization, so that it allows them to pay profits back to investors or depositors at intervals depending on the agreed profit sharing ratio. However, you know that banks are both, they act like the fund manager and also the intermediate fund from the surplus spending unit to the deficit spending unit of the country. So it means that they collect funds, everybody deposits funds. It means that when banks collect these funds, they have it in their possession, and they will definitely use it to create more assets. So in the process of creating an asset, they would have So the contract that binds this the bank and the customer is a Mudarabah transaction, saying that the bank had identified a particular asset that they want to invest in, and then they are expecting profit on it. So what that means is they would enter into this Mudarabah agreement with the investor. Them as a bank, they are fund managers, they are the experts in managing these funds. And then of course they would have used it for different purposes that would guarantees return. And then these returns will now then be distributed among the investors or among depositors. So that's a simple, clear Mudarabah. It means that because you don't want to have, bank does not want to lie to investors' fund. We want to ensure that as fund managers, or safekeepers of funds, they want to have this fund and ensure that customers are able to access the fund as arranged due. So this simply means that they need a particular contract that helps to dot these T's and I's in ensuring their responsibility as a bank to their customers. So Mudarabah is a perfect one for them, and then it has been useful. And so when we now talk from there, we now start talking about whether in a Mudarabah transaction you can have a restricted or unrestricted transaction.
Unrestricted, yes.
So it takes us back to the definition of trust, and then the risk attached or risk that is attached to a Mudarabah investment. If you look at it very clearly, you realize that for somebody who is an investor, a customer of a bank, transferring money to a bank or giving it to keeping it to the bank or moving it to another person really means that it's taking a particular risk. On basis of that, whatever happens to that transaction, using a Mudarabah contract means that the capital itself can even be lost in the process. If the capital is lost, and then there's no recourse to any liability on the part of the Mudari or the capital provider. So what do the person stand to gain? It means that going forward, Mudarabah contract can be a contract that will not be used. It means that the Mudarabah contract can continue to suffer that from the negligence of anybody, depending on the parties that have breached the contract, the conditions in the offer. However, so since it's a trust-based transaction, it's kind of trust-based transaction. There's a need for certain things to be mentioned in the contract. That's why we now have restricted and unrestricted Mudarabah. So when we have restricted, as investors, we have risk appetite. We understand that I want my investment to be invested, my funds to be invested in a certain sector, which I classify as less risky sectors. What that means is I would have mentioned it in the contract that I don't want my investment to be out of the scope of this sector, because I understand that this sector, according to classification, they are less riskier than some other sectors. So they can be specific. I want my investment or my funds to be invested in real estate. And of course, depending on the risk appetite, of course, we all know that they are the risk, they are the return, as the case may be. Now, so that is restricted. And the other case is the unrestricted, where you have, as a bank, they have different investments, they have different classes of assets. It means that for an investor, if you don't really have any form of risk appetite, you can decide that, bank, I'm giving you this money, you can use it for whatever purpose you like. The most important thing is just return my funds as I went due. And then, of course, it has to come with a profit depending on what you have deployed with it. So this is an open, it means that it's an open check for the bank to use this fund for whatever purpose they like. So it could also be classified, the bank can now decide on whether they want to take a portion of it for a particular sector, another portion of it to a partner sector. As a fund manager, they are able to do that. So these are issues around restricted and unrestricted investment. And this can also be traced to the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where when travelers are going, the investors or the owners of the property will mention to them that do not cross the sea with my money, because of the fact that it is riskier, and they do not go to the desert with my money, just because they know that there are bandits that can take over the money from the travelers. So there are instances where you can put conditions on the utilization of this one on the part of the.
So definitely the profit sharing ratio and duration must be pre-agreed at the beginning of the contract.
Yes, the profit sharing ratio has to be agreed by parties, and then they want to share this. So there are some costs that must be mentioned, some salient Sharia issues that must be mentioned in the Mudarabah contract. Some jurisdictions they have mentioned the fact that there's what we call profit equalization reserve. These are reserves that are taken out of investors' funds, or if you have a Mudarabah investment. So usually for fund managers, what they do is that when they know that an investment is going to be a recurring thing, maybe they'll continue to build houses for the next 5 years, but they want to do the first one, the second one, the third one, it's going to be basis. So it means that it allows them to say that investors, please come and put your funds when they put their funds in, and they want to make a provision that there's a smooth return in there's a smooth return on the part of repayment to of payment of profits to the investors. What that means is that they would have out of if an investment promised or has given a 50 million, have given a 50 million, and they will now say that okay, let's take a reserve, let's set aside like 10 million out of it and then distribute 40 million to the investors. So this 10 million will be set aside, and then this is going to be used to smoothing repayment of profits, and this for subsequent investment. So it's just a pool, a reserve that is set aside to ensure that repayment are being made at every level. Of course, some social scholars have mentioned that that is not too permissible, because of course, if I'm in this investment one, and then they want to commence another one, and I decide to pull out of that investment, part of my money, which is part of the 10 million naira, has been set aside, and then I cannot go back to that investment. I cannot take it out of when I'm leaving. So it means that they are taking part of my money to settle some other person in the future. So this is a kind of issue that Sharia scholar has mentioned. There are some instances where you understand that it's a trust-based transaction, and then of course the on the loss side we have the investors that would lose their capital as the capital they provided, and then on the other side on the flip side of which is the Modari, they will lose time and money. So it means that all these things are not as a result of the negligence of duty, breach of contract. So how do you think I should be confident enough to come and enter into a Mudarabah transaction? Some people have requested that can we get a kind of another level of guarantee, probably third party guarantee, kafala from anybody that will just guarantee that okay, in case this is not going to work, we can use process of this investment, or we can pay you from this. So somebody guaranteeing repayment to the investor that will allow the project to commence. So some scholars that mentioned that there shouldn't be any reason for guarantee, while some other scholars in some institutions also accepted that it should be allowed. Those that did not allow mentioned that it is also going to be killing the spirit of Mudarabah, where profit and loss should be shared among parties. So there are other concerns that can be discovered in a Mudarabah transaction, where of course scholars that made their clarity on it here.
Indeed, the Mudarabah contract, that is the restricted and unrestricted, we can say that Mudarabah contract is one of the trust-based contract. And so when we look at the tenet of Islamic finance, since inception, it has played a role in Nigeria's infrastructure and has been involved in funding projects such as the rehabilitation of roads, financial inclusion, employment, and reduction of poverty. Could you speak further on how Mudarabah financing can become more prominent within Nigeria's financial sector? The way we've used Sukuk in Nigeria, Sukuk is one of the best Islamic finance instruments that has been used for funding rehabilitation of roads. Can Mudarabah financing also become more prominent within Nigeria's financial sector?
Okay, so sorry, Bukola, it's very important that we kind of make further explanation around what Sukuk is and what Mudarabah contract is. So Sukuk is a concept, is a structure, and not a contract. So when we now talk about Mudarabah, Musharaka, Ijara, and every other thing, they are contracts that can be deployed. So when you have a structure, this is a kind of Sukuk, you need to put a contract to it so that it becomes a full Sukuk. Now, Sukuk, that means you can have a Sukuk Ijara, which we have by which of course is prominent with the federal government of Nigeria. We can also have Sukuk Mudarabah, which is, of course, we just saw the recent one by Taj Bank. We can also have some other Sukuk that we can apply with other form of contract, which is Sukuk Mudarabah. Of course, we have this, and this has been deployed in in some other jurisdiction. Yes, these are options that we can explore. If you talk about Sukuk Mudarabah, you can only use Mudarabah Sukuk depending on the nature of the project.
Okay.
So if you have okay, so let me just give you an example of what has happened in the Nigerian rehabilitation of road that has been done by the federal government. So they have used this instrument, they've used Sukuk Ijara because they want to do rental repayment to investors, the subscribers of Sukuk. So definitely, and then of course the construction, the asset, the underlying asset, which is construction of road, does not have anything to do with the repayment side. So it means that the government is out of its own good faith, and then its responsibility as the government to provide roads. So definitely, they are using this payment. They are getting their repayment from other sources to pay back the investors. So this is just the link between Ijara, Sukuk Ijara, and then it just means that they have a rental repayment that will be paid to investors, and then of course Ijara will be the best option for them. So, like I mentioned, you depending on the nature of the project or the nature of the process of the transaction, that is what inform you of whether to use any kind of other contract that we have. For Mudarabah, you can have instances where we have a lot of landowners that don't know what they can use for they can use. So government can decide that, okay, landowners, can you provide your land, because we understand that you have land. Let's take Oyo State as an example. They have a lot of land, and then they can enter into an agreement with the government and say that they will get funding through Sukuk. On the basis of that, they will enter into this transaction with you. They can use this process, the process of this Sukuk, to of course to cultivate farm produce. They can say that they want to produce a cassava, and then on the basis of that, they export and they get proceeds from the sale of that cassava. So when this proceed comes back, they can use it to pay back the investors. So this is a simple Mudarabah contract because there's a land provider, the people that had the land, they have their land, and then there's a provider of funds. So this, on the asset side, they have provided, they came together to ensure that they are able to meet up with the production of cassava. So somebody who had the land who does not have money to cultivate, and then somebody who had land who had money but does not have land. So these two parties come together to ensure that they're able to come up with that transaction process. So we've also gone from the housing and the of construction of housing. Government as part of its responsibility to ensure that there's housing. They provide more houses for people to live in, so they can decide to enter into developing arrangements with public-private partnership. And then when these guys come together, to those that have the expertise, they know how to build, and then of course the government had money to do what to provide houses. So these two parties can come together and then ensure that they build houses that would be taken, that will be sold to the populace. On base of that, monies can start coming, and then they'll be used to pay back the provider of funds. It could be the government could have used Sukuk to get these funds, and then they would have to pay back to the investors. So these are simple Mudarabah transactions. So that can be backed, or that can be used, that can allow Sukuk to thrive in it. Yeah, so that's it.
Apart from funding projects, Mudarabah can also be used to reduce poverty and create employment generation in Nigeria.
Everything has to do with funding.
Yes.
And then everything has to do with provision of social amenities for people. So for example, if government are embarking a project of saying they want to build roads or they want to construct houses, so of course they are going to employ people, and then of course able to bridge the employment gap. That's on one hand. Another hand is where you have reducing poverty. Of course, there are millions of people that doesn't have house where to stay, so they can of course they can enter into a agricultural scheme, agricultural scheme where they understand that they have land, they don't have no, they don't know what to do with it. So this, if government can fund these guys from the money that they have received, this of course it takes people out of poverty. So and then we can continue to recycle this until where we will now understand that the capital provider, they are happy, and those people who are working, that once they cultivate their product, they can easily give it to the government to export for sale purpose. So this is a complete circle, and then everybody is able to earn the reward on the risk they are taking here.
Thank you so much for that. It has been a very insightful session with you on matters in restricted and unrestricted Mudarabah investment. Thank you very much, Mr. Tunde. Have a great day, and we hope to feature you subsequently on the program. Bye for now.
Right. Good to have you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.